To lead the learning function successfully, managers need different skills than their team members who design and facilitate the training program. Let me share an ice cream model with you that I've developed that identify the 3 essential areas where learning managers need to develop expertise. The first is learning and development. And it might seem a little bit obvious, but if the learning manager comes from the business, they won't have that background in learning and development. So that's the first scoop in my ice cream cone. The second is they need skills to be able to manage projects and programs on an ongoing basis. The third skill area that they need is in business acumen. And it's an ice cream model because business acumen is scalable. So at the top of the ice cream model, we have senior leaders, VPs, and their scope of business acumen that they need is quite broad because of their senior role in the organization. As you move down to director and manager role, and even as an individual contributor, you still need business acumen skills in order to understand the clients, the internal business partners that you're working with, but your scope of understanding is maybe narrower. So that's the ice cream model with the essential skills for learning and development managers. So in this first video, let's take a look at the learning and development scoop and how managers' roles differ from instructional designers. I'd like to use the ADDIE design process as a backdrop, and in this video, specifically look at the analysis phase. So depending on the skills and the experience of the team, the learning and development team, the manager's role in the analysis phase might shift a little bit. Overall, their role is to be a liaison between the business and their learning team. They translate the business goals into priority projects for their team. They identify the metrics for success, and the learning programs need to support increasing the company's revenue or decreasing the expenses. Those are kind of the big bucket metrics that the learning manager is going to be looking for. The other thing that they can do is in the analysis phase is identify the different stakeholders and introduce those team members to those stakeholders so that the designers can have those meetings and gather all that information for them. It's also really important for the learning manager to have a process in place for what that analysis phase looks like. It helps streamline the process internally for their own team. It also makes it a smoother process when working with that client group and those stakeholders, that everybody knows what's expected in this process, what are the roles that everybody has, what are the timelines. So it gains confidence and trust with the business that your team is working with. So that's the manager's role. The learning and development person, they're going to be implementing that analysis. So they're going to be following up with all the individuals and booking interviews and team meetings and gathering all of the information. And for additional resource, you can look at the Institute for Performance and Learning. They have a competency assessing performance needs, which is part of their overall competency structure. So to wrap up, the deliverable coming out of this analysis phase is recommendations, a summary of what the process was in the recommendations. And if you have a learning and development hat on, you might call it a needs analysis summary or a recommendations document. But if I can push you a little bit to have a business lens, what you could call this document is a training business case. And I know it's just a title and maybe that's splitting hairs, but I think language matters. And I think as learning and development managers, we want to have a business lens over how we run our learning and development functions. So by calling it a training business case or a learning business case, we start moving into that business mindset instead of just a learning and development mindset.